Tomatoes. Juicy, vibrant, and bursting with flavor, they're a staple that quietly finds its way onto nearly every American table. They're everywhere in American food, layered on burgers, drizzled as ketchup over golden fries, simmered into rich sauces, and tossed into crisp salads. From backyard barbecues to family dinners, tomatoes are always present, adding color and taste to our favorite meals. This humble fruit, often mistaken for a vegetable, is a cornerstone of how we eat. In home kitchens and bustling diners alike, tomatoes are sliced, diced, and celebrated in countless recipes, both traditional and new. But tomatoes are more than just flavor, they're a pillar of American agriculture. Sprawling fields across the country are dedicated to their cultivation, and every harvest tells a story of hard work and tradition. Family farms, especially in Florida and California, have depended on tomatoes for generations. These farms are often run by families who pass down their knowledge, skills, and love for the land from one generation to the next. The tomato season shapes rural life, providing jobs and supporting entire towns. Local economies thrive during harvest, as workers, packers, and truck drivers all play a part in bringing tomatoes from field to table. When you see a ripe tomato at the store, you're seeing the result of months of hard work, careful tending, and the hopes of countless families. Each tomato represents a journey from seed to shelf, connecting farm to fork. But now, that simple act of buying a tomato is threatened by international trade disputes. Global competition and shifting policies have put pressure on American growers, making it harder for them to compete and survive. The story of the American tomato is no longer just about food, it's about trade deals, economic policies, and the real-world impact on farmers and families. Behind every tomato are people fighting to keep their livelihoods and traditions alive. The U.S. tomato industry is facing a crisis, and its future is suddenly uncertain. Fields that once flourished now stand empty, and the fate of many family farms hangs in the balance. What's at stake isn't just a crop, but a way of life. Generations of tradition, community, and pride are all tied to the fate of the American tomato. The all-American tomato is at a crossroads, and its story is far from over. The choices we make today will shape the future of this humble hero, and the communities that depend on it, for years to come. For nearly 30 years, the Tomato Suspension Agreement, or TSA, acted as a fragile peacekeeper in the North American tomato market, shaping the way tomatoes moved across borders and onto dinner tables. It was a unique solution to a problem that threatened to spiral out of control. In the 1990s, American tomato growers faced a crisis. A surge of cheap Mexican tomatoes flooded the U.S. market, often sold at prices below the cost of production. This influx put immense pressure on American farmers, who struggled to compete with the lower prices and feared for their livelihoods. To avoid a damaging trade war that could have hurt both economies, the U.S. and Mexico negotiated a compromise. Under the agreement, Mexican exporters agreed to sell tomatoes at or above a set minimum price, while the U.S. suspended its anti-dumping investigation. This deal was meant to stabilize the market and protect both sides. The goal was simple: to level the playing field for farmers in both countries, ensuring fair competition and preventing market manipulation. It was a delicate balance, requiring constant oversight and renegotiation. But American growers soon argued that the agreement was riddled with loopholes. They claimed Mexican producers found ways to sidestep the rules, continuing to undercut prices and making it nearly impossible for U.S. farmers to survive. Over the years, the TSA was revised 5 times in an attempt to close these loopholes and address ongoing complaints. Yet, U.S. farmers insisted that the core issue, unfair pricing, never truly went away, and frustration continued to build. After decades of mounting tension and repeated attempts at reform, the U.S. government finally decided to end the agreement in July 2025, signaling a major shift in trade policy and a new era for the tomato industry. Investigations confirmed what many American growers had long suspected. Mexican tomatoes were being dumped at unfairly low prices, causing significant harm to U.S. producers and distorting the market. The nearly 30-year truce was officially over, marking the end of an era and the beginning of renewed uncertainty for everyone involved. With the agreement gone, tariffs returned, reigniting a trade fight that threatened to escalate into a full-blown trade war between the U.S. and Mexico. The tomato market braced for dramatic changes. Prices, supply chains, and even the future of tomato farming in North America were suddenly up in the air. For American farmers, this was a last stand, a fight for survival in an industry that had already been pushed to the brink by years of competition and uncertainty. For consumers, the impact was just beginning to be felt, as the price and availability of tomatoes at the grocery store became the latest casualty in a long-running trade dispute. Dumping is at the heart of this conflict, and it's a term you'll hear often in debates about international trade and agriculture. Dumping happens when a country exports a product at a price lower than what it charges in its own market, or sometimes even below the cost of making it. This isn't just about getting a good deal, it's a deliberate tactic that can have serious consequences. Imagine a bakery selling bread for less than it costs to bake, not to help customers, but to force other bakeries out of business. The goal isn't to offer a bargain, but to eliminate competition and take over the market. That's dumping, a predatory strategy used to capture market share by undercutting rivals, often with the help of government subsidies or other support. It's illegal under international trade rules because it destroys domestic industries, wipes out jobs, and can devastate entire communities that rely on farming. U.S. tomato growers argue that Mexican tomatoes, often produced with government subsidies, are dumped in the U.S. at prices so low that American farmers simply can't compete. Investigations have revealed that some Mexican tomatoes were sold at up to 273% below what's considered fair value. That means they're not just a little cheaper, they're drastically underpriced, making it nearly impossible for local farmers to survive. This race to the bottom squeezes out local farmers who can't afford to keep selling at a loss. Over time, more and more family farms are forced to shut down. As farms close, jobs disappear, and entire rural communities begin to suffer. The impact goes far beyond just the price of tomatoes. It's about livelihoods and the future of American agriculture. For 3 decades, American growers say they've been fighting a losing battle under a broken agreement that was supposed to protect them, but hasn't kept up with changing market realities. Dumping isn't just an economic term, it's a real and present threat to the survival of American agriculture and to the families who depend on it. The end of the Tomato Suspension Agreement, or TSA, was a direct response to this crisis, as policymakers tried to find a way to level the playing field. But for many, the fallout is just beginning, and the future remains uncertain for countless American farmers. The rise of Mexican tomatoes in the U.S. wasn't gradual, it was explosive. Before 1996, most fresh tomatoes eaten in America were grown here. After the TSA, Mexican imports surged by 400%. U.S. farmers lost shelf space as Mexican tomatoes took over. In the mid-90s, American growers supplied 80% of the market. Now, it's just 30%. Mexico controls the other 70%. This isn't just competition, it's a complete market shift. Lower prices, even if unfair, won contracts with big retailers and restaurants. The supply chain reoriented south, leaving U.S. farmers behind. The American tomato industry was systematically displaced. For many, it felt like losing their own market in their own country. The takeover was swift and nearly total. The impact on American tomato farms has been devastating. More than half of U.S. family tomato farms from 1996 are gone. These weren't corporations, they were generational family businesses. Jobs disappeared, land was sold, and local economies suffered. Florida, once a tomato powerhouse, has been hit hardest. Commissioner Wilton Simpson warns, a nation that cannot feed itself cannot defend itself. Relying on imports makes the U.S. vulnerable to disruptions. The loss isn't just economic, it's a loss of expertise, heritage, and food security. Each closed farm takes decades of knowledge with it. The American tomato industry is on the brink. For many, the end of the TSA came too late. With the TSA gone, the U.S. slapped a 21% tariff on most Mexican tomato imports. The goal: make Mexican tomatoes pricier, giving American farmers a fighting chance. Critics warn this will spike prices at the grocery store, maybe by 50%. The U.S. relies on Mexican tomatoes, especially in winter, so supply could tighten. Retailers may pass the cost to you, making BLTs and pasta sauce more expensive. American growers argue the price hike is exaggerated, citing past suspensions where prices barely budged. They say tariffs will force fair pricing, not gouge consumers. The truth? Prices may rise, especially in winter, squeezing family budgets. The ripple starts with importers and ends at your dinner table. The big question: will it be a minor bump or a major shock? The answer will shape what and how much we eat. The tomato's fate is now everyone's business. To understand this crisis, listen to the farmers. American growers feel abandoned, forced to compete with unfairly priced imports. Robert Gunther of the Florida Tomato Exchange says, 5 agreements failed to stop illegal dumping. For U.S. farmers, ending the TSA is self-defense, a last hope to save their farms. They believe they can compete, but only on a level playing field. Across the border, Mexican growers see things differently. They deny dumping, crediting their success to efficiency and investment. Walberto Solorio calls the U.S. move political, not economic. Mexican farmers say they're meeting U.S. demand with quality tomatoes, not predatory pricing. They feel punished for their success, facing tariffs that threaten their livelihoods. Both sides feel wronged, and both are fighting for survival. The divide runs deep, with no easy answers. The tomato trade war hits restaurants hard, especially small, independent ones. Tomatoes are a menu staple, and price hikes can make or break a business. Owners face a tough choice: absorb higher costs or raise menu prices. Absorbing costs isn't sustainable. Raising prices risks losing customers. Teresa Razzo, a California restaurant owner, fears bankruptcy if prices soar. Small businesses lack the buying power of big chains and are especially vulnerable. A policy meant to help farmers can hurt restaurants and their workers. The crisis shows how interconnected our food system is. Protecting one industry can unintentionally threaten another. For many restaurants, the tomato war is a fight for survival. The fallout extends far beyond the farm. The American tomato is at a turning point. Ending the TSA is a lifeline for U.S. growers, but a threat to importers and consumers. Can the industry be rebuilt after decades of decline? It will take investment, new farmers, and support from retailers and shoppers. The future hangs between fair trade and free trade, food security and affordability. The simple act of buying a tomato now carries weight. The tomato's fate is a symbol of bigger questions. What kind of food system do we want? What price are we willing to pay? The hope is for balance, where American farms thrive and tomatoes remain a staple for all. The story isn't over. The next chapter is up to us.